We all know Black Americans are dying from COVID-19 at absolutely staggering states. In your state, they account for 57% of total deaths where race is known, even though they only make up 27% of the population. They're also getting hit the hardest economically. This is an issue we're highlighting here at ABC this week, and we know the president has tapped you to help them come up with a plan to address it. What advice are you giving him?
Well, I thank you, Megan, for that. And certainly my heart goes out to my own community where we've seen so many people devastated economically and, frankly, from a healthcare perspective by this virus. Some of the advice I've given the president is in the healthcare front, we have to have more testing and more telemedicine. If you live in the rural parts of South Carolina, whether you're black or white, the reality of it is getting to a doctor is harder than it's ever been. And frankly, for a long time, we told folks, don't come to the hospital. And so telemedicine can bridge that gap, and we need to make sure that the reimbursement rates are such that people will be able to afford to use telemedicine as providers and letting people get there. So that's one of the pieces of advice I've given to the president. The second piece of advice I've given to the president, that as a former small business owner myself, we need to make sure that African-American businesses are fully aware of the Paycheck Protection Program. We have about $100 billion left that we need to deploy. I put into the legislation $10 million for the Minority Business Development Agency to market in minority communities the fact that the Paycheck Protection Program was alive and well and that we wanted to help businesses. That loan becomes a grant. Small businesses, barbershops and beauty salons and landscapers are abundance in the African American community. They're some of the hardest working people you know, and they need to understand and know that the resources are there. They don't have to pay it back if they use it for overhead and for payroll. So getting that word out is something that I've suggested and reinforced to the president as well as the Secretary of the Treasury to make sure that we target smaller minority institutions so that the resources are there, the people know about it, and that we can get those two fused together.
Senator, what also has been going on, even though we also know, of course, that African Americans are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, the shootings continue. President Trump last week invoked you while talking about the senseless killing of Ahmaud Arbery. He says he called you to ask what you thought of the case. Why didn't he call perhaps a person from Georgia, a state representative in Georgia, which is where this occurred?
Well, I think it's partially because after the Charlottesville issue, I was fairly critical of the president, really very critical of the president's response, and that really forged an opportunity for me to go to the White House and talk about why I found his comments to be insensitive. That, frankly, opened a door of communication that I didn't expect to be opened. And since then, he and I have had many conversations about providing more funds for HBCUs. We were able to get $1 billion for HBCUs in the CARES Act. I focused on sickle cell anemia, and I was able to get him to work with me on value-based arrangements so that people could afford to have sickle cell treatment when it comes available at a price that they could afford. So when this issue came up with Ahmaud, it was just clear that the president and I already had that relationship, and I had put a call in to the Department of Justice asking Attorney General Barr to go down there and get involved. And I called Georgia as well and spoke with Attorney General Carr in Georgia to make sure that we took a look at every episode of the transfer of the responsibility and the fact that the video is really clear. That is murder. 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Yeah. I'm a black man that jogs too. And I just thought to myself, do I need to carry a gun everywhere I go? I was so frustrated by that video, so frustrated by the lack of response for 6 weeks that I wanted the president to understand my frustration and my serious concern that we cannot afford to go back to a James Byrd Day in 1998 or Emmett Till's. One of the reasons why I pushed legislation 2 years ago and got it passed in the Senate around anti-lynching. We need to make it clear and evident that we shall not put up with this crap anymore. And I wanted the president to hear my thoughts on it, and thankfully he called me that Friday evening and we had a serious discussion about it. I was in the White House this weekend. We talked about it again. I was in there last weekend. We talked about it again, and I'm glad to see that the Department of Justice is at least on the case. And I did the same thing after the Mother Emanuel shooting. I brought the Attorney General down to pay attention to what's happening in so many parts of the black community. And I want to be the guy that has a relationship and uses it for the betterment of folks who are desperately in need of a justice system that is actually blind.
Well, I think it's kind of amazing that you are the voice that's speaking up. I thank you for that, because I don't know, had it not been you, I don't know who he would have spoken to. But I know that, you know, when we're talking about something like COVID, you know, he keeps blaming China and then Obama, and you know, the models show that perhaps if we had done earlier lockdown, 36,000 fewer people would have died. I guess the question is, does that fall on his shoulders? And the second part of that is, do you see a flattening that is encouraging to you?
Well, I'll start with the second one and probably remember the first one. I'll say that as a guy that studies the numbers all the time, I am encouraged about the flattening of the curve. I spoke with Dr. Fauci in the last 2 days, and I asked him to do an Instagram Live with me for the African-American community, because we have such great respect for Dr. Fauci's comments, and I want to get more voices in there so that we can continue to see the curve go in the right direction. Frankly, if you want to see the curve flattened, we start with nursing homes, and then you work your way into the minority communities with an abundance of testing, because frankly, the African-American community are typically the certified nursing assistants helping the elderly population in nursing homes. Said differently, you have one vulnerable population being served by another vulnerable population. My mama's been a nurse's aide for 45 years, and I got to tell you that if we don't take care of both of those populations, there's going to be another spike in one of those places. We can avoid that. So I am pleased. I'm going to continue to push more resources towards testing every single member of every single nursing home in the country. I have legislation that does that. To your first question, I do think that the strategy at the beginning of stopping flights from coming into America, that containment strategy, is really important. I don't think we get any benefit of blaming the former president or the current president. This is like halftime in America. I don't play Monday morning quarterback at halftime. I want to get this thing under wraps, and then we can assess what should have been, could have been, or would have been done. But right now, it is Team America working as one united front to help the most vulnerable in this nation. The more we do that, I think the better off we will all be.